Hi everybody and welcome to GEMS. I'm Joanne Elphinston and today I'd like to talk to you about the use of the lunge in your movement assessment. Now the reason I've decided to talk about this is because so many people ask me why I don't test this in the way that other movement systems do. Say for example FMS. So they choose to do a very narrow base and they choose to use a pole on the back. I choose not to. Now the first thing I'd like to say is that this is not a critique of other movement systems. They have justifiable reasons for the information that they want to get. I, however, have other information that I want to get from this movement, so I use a slightly different technique. The first thing I need to look at is I want to see, can the body accept and support weight more unilaterally? Now, I've chosen to do this through the lunge rather than in a single leg squat because that level of loading introduces a confounding variable. So a confounding variable is something that gets in the way of you getting a clear answer. Because the first thing I want to find out is, does the brain talk to this area of the body in a way that allows it to accept and support weight? So I'm going to eliminate the high load and I'm going to eliminate the balance challenge for the moment. They're things that I can layer on later once I have the answer to my basic question. The next thing is, what is the proprioceptive and control relationship between the pelvis and the trunk? In other words, can the pelvis carry the trunk? And thirdly, I want to see whether these things can happen through a range of hip flexion. So I'm looking at the eccentric performance as the muscle lengthens. So here are my three questions. Now the next thing is I want to test with the foot in the position that I'd like to see the person functioning in. So I'm not actually going to put the foot into a narrowed position. This is not actually how I'd like to see them run, for example. So I'm going to start with them in a position reflective of their functional position. In fact, if they run crossing into this position, the research shows you get an increase in stress through your iliotibial band and an increased incidence of lateral knee pain. So I'm not really interested in putting the foot here, but I am interested in putting it back in position where I'd want the weight bearing to occur. I'm also not going to choose a narrow base because again it layers on a confounding variable. Because for some people this constitutes a significant balance challenge to have one foot in front of the other. So if they fail at the test, I don't know exactly what the problem is. Is it a balance issue? Is it an issue to do with the relationship of the lower limb to the pelvis? Or is it that they don't know how to support themselves? I don't know. So what I want to do is clarify and eliminate as many of these confounding variables as possible. So again, I'm going to take up a more neutral base. Now, I also am going to be looking for the relationship between the trunk and the pelvis. So this is a proprioceptive relationship and it's a control relationship. I need to know that this can happen automatically from within the body. So I choose not to use the pole because this is a source of external sensory feedback. It's input. It helps the person to know where their trunk and pelvis are in relationship to each other. So I actually need to know, can they do that for themselves? So I choose not to put a pole on the back. So what am I going to do instead? Well, with the arms, I can choose to take the arms either here or a bit more to the side. The reason I might choose to do that is to more clearly see whether the person is needing to access other help globally in the body. So when I say this, I'm really specifically talking about the posterior oblique myofascial sling. So you have the gluteals on one side coming up into the thoracolumbar fascia across the back here. You've got latissimus from the other side coming in to create this relationship. So if one end of the relationship, say, let's for example say the glutes, is having a few problems activating, then the body says, do you know, I need to make this sling secure. So I'm going to use the lats a little bit more to help. And you'll see this if you have the arms here, because you'll see the arm pulled downwards or inwards. Or even sometimes you'll just see the arm do a strange stiffening, which also activates the lats. So I can see all of this if I just have the arms here. So I'm going to take up a split stance, back heel is up, body weight comes slightly onto the front leg to tell the brain this is the target leg, this is the one I'm looking at. And from here I'm going to ask for a straight downwards motion. Now, what's interesting is that you can find out the first bit of information, that is, what is the neuromuscular pattern, within the first third of the movement, before strength becomes an issue, because that isn't actually a strength issue. It's a coordination and patterning issue. So if they don't have that pattern in place, what you'll see is very early either they'll take the hip back, which will preferentially load the quads and the hamstrings instead, or they'll take it out of the sagittal plane into the frontal plane, or into the transverse plane, or of course the leg will react to this kind of thing by moving medially. Now, you can pick it up early, and that's great because you know at this level, this is not a strength problem. This is a patterning problem. So you file that into your program plan. Now, let's say no problem in the first third of the range, but as they move more deeply into hip flexion, we start to see problems. Well, here what we've got is the hip extensors working eccentrically, that's in a lengthening direction, further into range. So we're moving towards outer range. So if we have problems here, so let's say, for example, I'm going to drop my body weight, I'm going to take it down. Once I get down here, I've now made the muscle lengthen into outer range. That's quite specific. So that also is going to inform your plan for your program. This is the area that they have problems in. So it's been quite clear. Now, if they've managed to do that effectively, now I can layer other things on to find out how robust and how diversifiable is this pattern. So I could choose to change the center of gravity with simple arm movements. I could challenge the balance systems, so I could either close the eyes, or more interestingly, I can move the head as the person performs this static lunge. So I want to know how good are the proprioceptive systems feeding back to make this pattern available even when the eyes are compromised. I could choose to dissociate another body part. All of these things layer something on, but you are in complete control of the questions you are asking and the answers that you are getting. Now, I then have a choice. I could either choose to load it to further investigate strength, or I can choose to find out about the timing, because although the static lunge shows us what is available, the dynamic lunge, where we're going to step into the lunge, is going to tell us, can we switch it on in time to actually use it?